Why did the US lose the war in Vietnam? Turns out it was capitalism's fault. US war planners, hot off victory in World War II, were convinced that all it took to win a war was to crank out more tanks, bombs, and planes than the enemy. Turns out they were wrong. Let's take a closer look at how capitalist war production theories lost the war in Vietnam. Back on May 9th, I did a post about Frederick Winslow Taylor, the father of scientific management. Taylor got his start at Bethlehem Steel Company in the early 20th century. He thought science could be used to get workers to do more work in less time. Increased productivity was the goal. Taylor was famous for prowling factory floors with a stopwatch and notepad in hand, scrupulously trying to break down manual tasks into a discrete series of measurable moves known as piecework. Taylor was trying to prove the best management is a true science, resting upon clearly defined laws. Workers suspected that Taylor was secretly trying to make every employee interchangeable. Say worker Ralph calls out sick. Simply spend 2 minutes teaching Charlie what Ralph does, and boom, you don't need Ralph anymore. Factory workers found Taylorism dehumanizing. And, as workers had feared, it did indeed make them easier to replace. Taylorism also greatly weakened the power of unions over time. As I said in my May post, Taylorism is probably the reason you hate your job. But ultimately, American productivity did surge thanks to Taylorism. Scientific management also got part of the credit for helping win World War II. It's said that superior technology and production led the Allies to victory over the Axis powers. The US was able to outproduce Germany and Japan when it came to tanks, planes, and ammunition. It was our war machine versus theirs. And in the end, the Axis powers simply could not compete. It was only a matter of time until America's superior war production system wore the enemy down and forced their submission. At the end of the war, American industrial output was a big reason the US made up 50% of world GDP. As scientific management had been applied to industry in the past, some of the big brains in America saw how the rationalization of war production could reshape global power. In 1974, Henry Kissinger reflected on the post-war era, saying, "A scientific revolution has for all practical purposes removed technical limits from the exercise of power in foreign policy." The way he saw it, because the US had the biggest, most efficient economy and industry capable of making the most technologically advanced war machines on Earth, the US possessed almost unlimited power for global control. In one of the best books I've ever read, The Perfect War, Techno War in Vietnam, author James William Gibson describes how war production theories were applied in Vietnam, a process he calls techno war. If there was one man more responsible than any other for bringing scientific rationalization to warfare, it was Robert McNamara. As a professor at Harvard Business School during World War II, McNamara first gained fame for organizing bombing raid patterns over Germany. In the 1950s, McNamara was vice president and general manager of the Ford Motor Company, one of the whiz kids hired by Henry Ford II to use modern planning and scientific management to whip the company's chaotic organization back into shape after the war. McNamara did such a fine job, he was the first person from outside the Ford family to be given the top executive position in 1960. 1 month later, John F. Kennedy named him as Secretary of Defense. As Kennedy's and then Lyndon Johnson's defense secretary, McNamara approached the war in Vietnam the same way he did when he was making Ford Falcons. Warfare was simply another production equation, where one had to find the ideal point on a marginal utility curve. Victory was conceptualized as killing North Vietnamese at a faster rate than they could replenish. Death was the product, and whichever side had the most efficient production capacity would come out on top. In a war of attrition, the thinking went, the only thing that matters is the technological production system. The United States had Bell helicopter factories cranking out Huey Hogs. Republic Aviation was pumping out F-105 Thunder Chief fighter bombers. McDonnell Douglas was chugging out F-4 Phantoms, Boeing assembling B-52 Stratofortresses by the dozens, and on and on. The United States was also producing vast amounts of ordnance. Fun fact, during World War II, the US dropped a combined 2 million tons of bombs in the European and Pacific theaters. Between 1965 and 1973, the US dropped at least 8 million tons of bombs on Southeast Asia. Not just Vietnam, but Cambodia and Laos too. Quantitatively, there was just no way the North Vietnamese could compete. How could a nation of peasants riding bicycles possibly beat the mighty US war machine? The US had the richest, most technologically advanced economy on Earth. Defeat was not only incomprehensible, it was unthinkable, inconceivable. This is part one of a 4-part series on how capitalism lost the Vietnam War. In my next post, we'll take a closer look at how the wheels started coming off. Until then, please like, follow, favorite, repost, and check out my link tree to sign up for my Substack so you can have my posts sent directly to your inbox. Let's make them pay.